All right. Hi, everyone. Very happy to have you over for this second Q&A session organized by the IEA Energy Storage Task 45. So Task 45 is about accelerating the market uptake of large thermal energy storage. And as part of the subtask 4, we are the dissemination part. We are both organizing some Q&A sessions, but also some webinars. And at the end of the of this Q&A session, I'm just gonna put a slide with the program, which also includes the upcoming webinar in December. Sorry. Yes, I'm recording the webinar because, as you might have noticed, we published the recording of the webinar and Q&A sessions on the website. That maybe Geoffroy can share the link, and as well as the Q&A. So we are recording the questions and the answers, and we're uploading all of that on the website. Yes. So we have gathered questions from the audience, and we have sorted them into 5 topics. So Geoffroy and from Planergy, but also Yannis from DTU have contributed to this. So the 5 topics that will be covered with questions today will be the market potential of large thermal energy storage, then some economic aspects related to LTES projects. Afterwards, EU regulation regarding LTES projects, some legal aspects, and finally some LTES system integration and technical aspects. So each of some questions. So we're gonna cover some questions for each of these 5 categories. But so we have a bunch of experts that have joined us today. So LTES experts from pit, tank, LTES, aquifer, borehole, but also one expert that is specialized in EU regulations for the 3rd and 4th topic. But let's just start with the first topic, the market potential of large thermal energy storage, with the first question. So the first question is, what is the needed LTES installed capacity to achieve net zero carbon emissions in 2050 for Europe or for specific European countries? Are there reports giving this information? Are there any experts that would like to contribute to this question? Geoffroy?
Yes, and I have actually seen this question before and prepared a little bit. So I will start, and then maybe the other experts can also share their knowledge. The first number that is close to a top-down approach, I would say, is provided by the EU-funded Project Treasure, which is focusing on pit thermal energy storage. And in this project, there has been estimated a required PTES capacity of 71 terawatt hour by 2050 in the EU. And that corresponds to approximately 8,000 pit thermal energy storages of 250,000 cubic meter volume. So that's a significant amount of pit thermal energy storages that would be required. And the assumptions that are used to come to this number have been presented at a conference called EuroGeo 8 that was held in Lille. It was about geosynthetics, and we will share the link to this study. In terms of potential on regional and let's say Europe and specific European countries, I can speak for Denmark by saying that several studies have been made positioning the role of large thermal energy storages in the future energy system. These studies usually focus on tank thermal energy storage and sometimes pit thermal energy storage, but I will mention a couple of them, and also we will share the link to these specific studies. But the two first studies that I would mention are studies made by Aalborg University, um, and they are studying on specific case of Denmark, looking at 2050 in a carbon neutral scenario. And there they have investigated large thermal energy storages in a cross-sectoral approach. So they've looked at smart energy system integration levels, where they try to see how does your energy system uh, um, behave using only the electricity sector, and then maybe integrating also the heating and cooling sector, and then integrating industry, and then including transport and so on. And the further you go, the different energy storage solutions have an impact on your system in terms of costs, but also in terms of usage of renewable energy. And this study is quite interesting and is, again, cross-sectoral. Another study by Aalborg University has been focusing on thermal energy storage and how it should be implemented in Denmark towards 2040, 2050. So again, I will share these two studies. But then there are other interesting studies that were made for Denmark. For example, one made by DTU that is including both pit thermal energy storage and tank thermal energy storages. And that's an interesting perspective. And then last but not least, in the IEA Energy Storage Task 35, which was about flexible sector coupling, there was a national study made for Germany that was looking at the impact of having more or less large thermal energy storages coupled to district heating. And all of these studies have actually shown a positive influence of having more large thermal energy storages in the energy system. So again, I will share some links, but that's what I can name for now.
All right. Thank you very much, Rufa, for this answer. Any other expert would like to contribute to this question, or if not, I think it was a good explanation. I guess we can just move on to the second question, still about the market potential. So the question is there some top-down estimation of the required regional short and long-term LTS capacity for district heating? Yes, who would like to take this one?
I think I can just extend. It's pretty much related to the previous question in a way. To the best of my knowledge, at least, there aren't any very specific top-down estimates about regional or national scale, especially including this differentiation between short-term and large-term and long-term storage. So short-term would be daily storage, and long-term being weekly or seasonal storage. But the estimate that I've mentioned about that was provided by Treasure kind of is a top-down approach. So you look at the entire energy system and see, in theory, what would be the requirement in terms of storage, but it does not differentiate whether this storage should be for short-term or long-term storage. So yeah, I don't think there is anything very specific about this, and I would say that the most elaborate study that is tackling both like different LTES technologies is probably the last one that I mentioned from DTU, that is both looking at TTES and PTES, and that is based on overall energy system calculations, and as I said, not a top-down approach. But I don't know if the other experts have knowledge of some top-down estimates regarding LTES capacity. If there aren't any, it actually probably shows that there is a lack of this kind of estimates in the EU. At least that this question hasn't very much been studied. Yanis, I can see that you raised your hand.
Yeah, I just wanted to add on that study from DTU that I mean, technically this is included because the TTES are only considered for short-term storage, and the PTES are considered for long-term. So there is this indirect answer to this. Of course, using different technologies for the short and the long term, but this is included in that study you have already mentioned.
Yeah, it's just not a very top-down approach, but it does look at the potential for these short and long-term technologies. So yeah, indeed. Thank you.
All right. Thanks a lot, Chitu. Let's move on to the third question. By the way, also moving on to the next category, the economic aspects. So the question is the following: which costs are included in the investment cost for LTES and which are not? So for example, planning, property, added value, tax, etc. Who would like to answer this one? Per Alex, yes?
Well, I can start. We have some lists in the Danish technology catalog made from the Energy Agency. And when we calculate the storage prices, we have included the excavation and in and outlet and the membranes and the lids and the connection pipes to the heat exchanger and pumps on the storage side and the building for heat exchanger and storage. So and pumps. So in principle, we include all the extra costs which are needed to connect the storage and to build the storage. But we are not including the water, and we are not including design work normally. So it's only investments.
All right. Thanks for the answer. Maybe another answer from like another technology, like aquifer or borehole, but Geoffroy, you can take it.
Yeah, it's more of a general comment, but I think it would be relevant also to have some specifics about aquifer or borehole thermal energy storages. But in general, this in anticipating the investment cost of a large thermal energy storage is a quite complex task. Because the scope can vary a lot. As Per Alex mentioned, if you look at the storage alone, or if you look at auxiliary equipment, whether it is a heat pump or buffer storage or connection to district heating, the technical building, etc., that can increase or decrease the cost significantly. But usually the investment costs that are reported cover mostly the storage alone, but not the full picture. So for example, a PTES or TTES, they can work without auxiliary equipment. They can just work with pumps. But if you look at a BTES, for instance, it usually requires a buffer storage on top of it. And when you look at the specific cost for the BTES, the buffer storage is not included in those, in most studies at least. So it's a complex question, and you have to look at the whole picture when you try to consider costs for large thermal energy storages. Another general comment is that depending on the technology, if you look at LTES and BTES, for example, usually they will tend to have lower specific costs than PTES and TTES, but they're also more suited for larger volumes, and they also cannot provide exactly the same services. So, for example, a BTES will not store heat. Usually, it will not store heat at very high temperatures, and they cannot respond in very short time scales, such as a TTES can, for example, or even a PTES. That's more for the general consideration, and I think it would be interesting to hear more about ATES, and I think I see that Bas has his hand raised, so the floor is yours.
Thank you, Geoffrey, and I really agree with you. It's always a question of what's exactly the definition of your ATES system, what has been included. I'm not sure what's exactly now the included cost which the question is referring to, but normally when we define the cost of an ATES system, we look to everything which is beneath the subsurface till the heat exchanger and the equipment which is directly connected to the ATES system. So that can be the controlling system. In some cases you have some water treatment, especially for the ATES system. So then that part of the cost are included, but from the heat exchanger and then to the heat pumps or the connection with the district heating system, that's normally not included when you look at the storage of ATES costs. And like the planning cost, etc., I'm not absolutely sure if that's included, yes or not, but normally you have to count between 5 to 10% for all kind of consultancy, design work, project management, etc. But I think that's more a general number. And normally ATES is not just one solution on its own, but often a solution in a bigger ecosystem. So it's not always so clear that you can split it up and say, okay, this is ATES, this are the other costs. But as I started with, normally it's everything beneath the subsurface till the heat exchanger and what is directly related to ATES.
Thank you very much, Bas.
All right. Yep. Thank you. You can.
Yeah. I just have I agree with Bas and his comments on ATES, and I just wanted to add that for BTES and for ATES, at least for BTES, property is not really an issue because you don't really use the land above. I mean, you can use the land above the boreholes and the aquifer for whatever you want. So at least in Sweden, you need to use your own property to drill on, and you have to stay within the property borders. And once you have completed the boreholes for well drilling, the property is still there and you can use it for whatever. So it's not really an issue for ATES, for BTES at least, and probably in most cases not for ATES, as compared with tank storage and pit storage, which does require some property.
I agree.
All right. Thank you very much, you all, for those inputs. Yes, let's just move on to the fourth question. What are the key factors influencing the capex and opex of a large thermal energy storage? Who would like to answer this one? Yes, Geoffrey?
Yeah, I can start. I would say, well, maybe the first one would be the size of the storage, because large thermal energy storages, the bigger they are, the cheaper they get. There are big economies of scale. If you look at most technologies, it's true. So that would be, I'd say, one big influential factor. And then the location, the underground conditions potentially have a strong influence on the cost of the storage. If you look at a pit thermal energy storage, for example, if you don't have good underground condition, then you might have to, I don't know, have to handle some groundwater flow or some soil that is not properly suited for the implementation of a pit. And then the cost can increase significantly for, I guess, for an ATES or a BTES, depending on the type of soil that you have to drill, it might cost more or less as well. And as I said, the location and as Singhild mentioned, the location is maybe not that important in terms of how much the land would cost in the case of an ATES or a BTES, but in the case of a PTES, especially, but also for a T-test, you need to use some ground, and that can be very costly, especially if it's close to a city. So usually these kind of storages would tend to be on the outskirts of the city. That would be my beginning of answer.
Shall I pick it over from you?
Yes.
I'd like to comment it from the ATES perspective. when you look at the distribution of the capex cost for an ATIS system, and especially high temperature ATIS, then about 2/3 is spent on the drilling and the wells. So that's the most important part, and about the other 1/3 is then for the technical room and other costs. So I think the most important is that the subsurface conditions, how deep you have to drill, what's the diameter you have to drill, where is the best aquifer to store the heat, the selection of the materials, because for high temperature we use more expensive well pipings and pumps, so that will definitely increase the cost. So I would say the wells and the equipment in the wells are the cost driving factor. On the surface itself, there's not so much space needed because you need a few square meters to drill your wells and to have your well heads. Maybe sometimes some piping, but normally we see that the project developer or the owner of the system itself or the plant, they have enough space to put the ATIS wells on their own property. So then costs for land is not a real issue. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, Single.
Yeah, I'll add to that on BTES. I'd say it's the drilling that's the big capital cost carrier. I'm not sure when it comes to very large system, but a general rule, at least in Sweden, is that 1/3 of the capital cost for a borehole thermal energy storage system is the drilling, 1/3 is the installation, and 1/3 is the heat pump or the sort of the equipment, very roughly. So that's what I've heard. It may be more on the drilling cost if the system is very large, I would assume. As for the operation cost for BTES, it's very low. Once you have everything installed, there is very little mechanical things going on outside of the machine room. I mean, of course, you have some maintenance of heat pumps if you use that, and circulation pumps and the like, distribution system. But inside the boreholes, in the ground, very little mechanical things happened, and we know that the operation costs are very low for that. Basically, just circulation pumps.
All right. Thank you very much. Anas, do you have a comment to this?
Yeah, I'm just gonna. I mean, I think most has already been said, but I work mostly on LTES, so just a few details maybe. So definitely the size of the storage counts, but I feel like there is less of an economy of scale when it comes to LTES. There's a nice paper that's been done about all the economical costs by the HSLU. Underground conditions definitely do matter a lot, and I know of a project here in Switzerland where there were a lot of unexpected conditions when it came to the underground conditions, and well, the initial capex was estimated to be around 6 million francs, and well, it exceeded by about 20% when we found out this about the underground conditions. And lastly, the last one, and I think that one might be important, is, well, it depends where this thing is being built, and the labor cost is also important. If you build it in Switzerland, it's not going to be the same as if you build it in Denmark or like Sweden or whatever, especially when it's such a specialty job, let's say, and well, we don't have a lot of labor force in this specific sector here in Switzerland. So what happens is that we end up getting people from foreign companies, for instance, Germany, Austria, and the costs are dramatically different from what we have in Switzerland. Yeah, aside from that, I'd say most of the costs for LTES are related to the storage itself. So from the simulations that we did, it's above 70%. So it's mostly the storage itself, so the tank itself, that takes up most of the costs. Yeah, that was just a little detail that I wanted to add up. Thank you.
All right. Thanks for that. But Alex, regarding the pit part.
Yeah, for the pit storage is if you don't have extremely bad excavation conditions, then the major part is the membrane work and the membranes, and it's a lid. I think it's normally at least 60% of the capex. For operation, then it's I actually tried to find, if you can look at this is in Danish kroner. But it's for Høje Taastrup, and it's a storage of 70,000 cubic meters. And if you look at the total maintenance, it's you could say nearly everything which is where you have to look after it every day. Then it's 240,000 Danish kroner. And then there's you have to add water because there's an evaporation of water. So, but that's maybe 20-25% of the cost in Høje Taastrup. The main cost, that's the pumping cost, that's electricity for pumping. So, and in this case, we have used 26 cycles. And if we have to use 26 cycles, then the pumping cost will be 80%. So it's very much dependent on how you use the storage.
Yes, that makes sense. Perfect. Thank you. Thank you for those inputs. So I guess this question has been quite well covered. Yes. So the fifth question, still regarding economic aspects, is: are there studies on how much can levelized cost of heat be reduced by using large thermal energy storage? Yes, Yanis?
Yeah, so yeah, there are actually a lot of studies on this. Of course, there is no clear answer because I mean, all the studies, the problem is that they're very system specific, right? So of course, depending on the boundary conditions that each study has set and the types of systems investigated, then the results can be very different. So for example, if it's like a solar-based system, or if it's a system that utilizes, for example, some electricity generation units and stores the heat in some kind of LTES, the results are very, very different. And in general, I guess I can provide a couple of links to some studies. But the one thing I would probably like to mention is that there is a very big difference depending on which software these studies have used. So for example, there are some software that calculate energy flows, and these are like Energy Pro and Balmoral. And in general, these software have a tendency to present a little bit better results, let's say, because they don't really take into account the temperature in the storage, and that means that they don't really account for stratification, or if you can, for example, discharge your storage fully, they can always assume that you can utilize all the energy that is in your storage, which is not always the case. So generally, I would say that probably studies that have used software like Transys or Modelica have a tendency to present a little bit more accurate results because these models, they simulate the storage in detail, so the results that you obtain are a little bit more representative. And that in general, there is more uncertainty in the results of studies that use LTES for short-term operation, because they usually include some kind of forecasting, and they assume like a perfect forecast. Yeah.
All right. Yeah, don't feel free to upload the links of that. Yes,
Is the
thanks
best
for that.
place to do
Anyone
it in
else?
the chat, or
Yeah.
like should this be okay?
On the chat, and I think it's good. So going to be on the website later on. Yes. Then we have 2 questions regarding the EU regulation and legal aspects for LTES projects. Unfortunately, our expert is delayed and cannot join right now, but she's supposed to be there in half an hour. So we'll just jump those 2 categories and just take them later. So let's move on to question 8 regarding the new topic, LTES system integration and technical aspects. So the question is, how would a heat pump after a PTES be controlled? So, for example, the mass flow or compressor adjustment. Yes, Niels?
Well, the question is very broad, I think, because a heat pump can be integrated in a lot of different ways in a system with a PTES. So I will give you 2 examples here. The first example is when the heat pump is using an external heat source. It could be waste heat or ambient air, anything like that. In this case, the cold side of the heat pump is controlled as usual, so there's no specialties there. On the warm side, you could control the water flow to control the outlet temperature from the heat pump, because normally you want to have a fixed outlet temperature from the heat pump, and then the heat pump should control the water flow. You should be aware that if the water flow is controlled by another thing, it could be the heat demand, for instance, then the heat pump cannot control the mass flow or the flow through the heat pump, and then it could be difficult to control a very fixed outlet temperature from the heat pump. If that should be improved, you should have a TTES in between the heat pump operation and the heat demand. But in case the water flow controlled by the heat pump, I would say that the flow should be controlled by the condensing pressure, because then you have a short regulation circle in the system. In the other example, the heat pump is used at the same time to cooling the PTES. Then the heat source is an internal heat source, and controlling on the warm side of the heat pump is the same as before. There's nothing new there. But on the cold side, you can choose between at least 2 different strategies. One strategy is that you want to control the outlet temperature of the heat pump on the cold side. And the other strategy is that you're just using a high flow on the cold side. In that case, you don't need to control the flow, just to have a high flow. That will give a higher outlet temperature from the heat pump and therefore also a higher COP. But if you have to cool the PTES down to a very low temperature, then you need to circulate the water to the PTES multiple times.
All right. Thanks, Niels, for this answer. If no other experts would like to contribute to that one, we can just move on to the next one. So is it possible to discharge the storage always only via heat pump to reach the forward temperatures of the grid, or would an additional post-heating boiler be needed? Yes?
Yes, technically, of course, it is possible to design a heat pump to take care of the full heat demand here, while also reaching the desired forward temperature, but it might not be the most feasible solution. So you need to consider that in every case. What are your options here? It will depend on which temperature do we want to reach, and also should the heat pump be sufficient large to meet the required heat demand at all times. If you're using the heat pump just for this and do not using anything else, then the heat pump capacity should be designed to meet the highest heat demand and the worst conditions. So that's the lowest temperature on the cold side and the highest temperature on the warm side. And the other solution will be that the system is not able to provide all the required heat, so you need boilers anyway. And if you have boilers in the system, you can use them in series with the heat pump, and then use the boilers for post heating. And the heat pump can be operated at a lower exit temperature from the warm side, and therefore also have increased COP.
All right. Thanks for that. Bas?
Yes, thank you. It's a tricky question because it strongly depends on a number of variables, like what is the supply temperature of the heat you have in excess. Then you need to store it, and then it's the question, what is the volume, how much it's needed, and at which temperature you can discharge it. Or then secondly, it's also important to know what's exactly the required temperature in the grid itself. So for district heating systems, it's maybe quite high. We also design high temperature ATES systems for greenhouses. They can often use a lower temperature in their heating network. Normally, we would recommend that if you can skip the heat pump in your concept, in your energy concept, that will be much more better. You have smaller investment, but also you have smaller operational costs. We normally do an assessment when there is a question from a client to see, okay, what is exactly the total ecosystem of the heat needed, which can be stored, and then see if a heat pump is needed or not. And in some cases, it's more efficient to run everything at a lower temperature without heat pump instead of having a heat pump. But if you need it, yeah, then you need it, and you need to add it to your energy concept. So I don't think there's one clear answer. It always depends on the situation, and you have to evaluate and calculate what is the most optimal solution. And then it depends on, do you like to focus on the capex, on the operational cost, on the sustainability, etc.
All right. Thanks, Singhild.
Yeah, but when it comes to borehole thermal energy storage, I just want to share some experience. In general, the borehole thermal energy storage temperatures aren't that high, so in most cases you will need a heat pump, even if it's a grid system, as far as I know. But if you look at more local systems and high temperature borehole thermal energy storage systems, there are examples that do not use heat pumps at all. There is one example from, or one industrial high temperature borehole thermal energy storage system in Sweden that was used for the Xylem factory in Emmaboda in the middle south of Sweden. And they are using heat from the foundry to store heat in the ground in a borehole storage with 144 boreholes or something like that. It's insulated at the top. The initial 10 years or so, they stored heat at about 40 degrees and extracted it at the lower temperature, obviously, to store excess heat from the process in the summer to the heating of the buildings in the winter. After a few years, they realized that it was a better affair to actually lower the temperature in the boreholes and add heat pumps. That would keep the maximum temperature in the borehole storage to about 20 degrees instead of 40. And by doing that, they could climatize they could regulate the indoor climate in the foundry so that the indoor comfort became much better, and the total economic gain from this modified system was was very much larger. So that was a system. It's an interesting experience from telling something about temperature levels and what you can gain from one another. There is another example of a heat pump free system in Drake Landing community in Okotoks in Canada, Ottawa region, where they have about, I don't remember how many, 140 boreholes, something, that heats 50 single-family houses in a sort of a local grid, thermal grid. They have solar panels on the grass roofs and store solar heat in the ground, but they also have tanks on the top. I mean, short-term storage tanks at the top of the ground, on the ground, and then use the boreholes for long-term storage. They don't use heat pumps at all, and they've operated for several years, and they have reached a solar fraction of 100% during some years. So that's a very nice example. You can find information about it at Drake Landing Solar Community.
Perfect. Thank you so much for that.
Maybe you can post a link in the chat, Singhil. That would be nice.
Yes, sounds good. Well, thank you. Let's move on to the next question. When the top temperature in the storage is still above the return temperature of the district heating grid, how would the discharge via heat pump look like? Yes, Niels?
Yes, that's quite simple, I think. Again, we have to distinguish between if the heat pump is cooling the storage or it's having an external heat source. If you take the first example, having an external heat source, then you will take your return water through the heat exchanger to the pitas for preheating, and then you will take this water through the heat pump condenser afterwards. You might have a small bypass for undercooling the refrigerant to get a better COP, but that's some technical details there. In the second case, where the heat pump is cooling storage at the same time, then the return water from the district heating network will first enter the evaporator of the heat pump, and then the heat exchanger from the pitas, and then end in the condenser from the heat pump.
All right. Thank you.
And maybe I should add also that in case the temperature in the storage are too low to contribute to this, then you can use some valves and make a closed loop between the heat pump and the evaporator of the heat pump, the storage. Then you can cool the storage down to very low temperatures, but the capacity of the system is lower than in the first example.
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much. Yes. Next question is, which temperature is usually used to calculate the storage capacity in megawatt hour for LTES? Who would like to take this one? Yes, Jafar.
So this very much differs from technology to technology, but I will speak for the two technologies that I know of most, which are the tank and pit thermal energy storage technologies. For the pit thermal energy storage, usually the temperatures that are considered go up to 90 degrees, and some very recent development allow this to be up to 95 degrees, but not higher than this. For a tank thermal energy storage, the typical temperature, maximum temperature, would be the what is just before boiling, so it's about 97 degrees Celsius, accounting for the let's say nucleation of water in a tank. So that's about 97 degrees. And if you slightly go in overpressure, you can go up to 100, up to 104 degrees even in some specific designs without having a specifically pressurized tank. So that's the maximum temperature. And then usually the minimum temperature that you have in those kind of storages is the return temperature plus a couple of degrees if you're coupled via heat exchanger, and if you're coupled directly to your district heating network, then it's the return temperature of your district heating network. But then, as Niels was mentioning, if you're coupling it with a heat pump, then you can go below this temperature, and then you can go even lower. But typically the temperature again for let's say a district heating network in Denmark would be 90 to 45, 50 degrees for a PTES, and for a TTES it would be 95, 97 to 45, 50 again. That would be the typical range.
All right. Bas?
Yeah. I think when you look at the temperature range for large-scale ATIS heat storage, then you can count a little bit from 30 to 50 to 90 degrees. There are systems running at a temperature. There are also some wishes to install ATIS systems at more than 125 degrees, but that should be on greater depths to have that higher temperature. If the question is more how to calculate the storage capacity, then I think you normally take the injection temperature as the temperature multiplied by the volume to calculate how much megawatt hours you can store. And when you want to know how much energy you can retrieve, then you have to count, okay, what will be the injection temperature and what will be the abstraction temperature to get an idea about the amount of stored heat which you can abstract. And that's something, that's maybe a little bit different. Yeah, or that's another answer to, I think, the same question.
Thanks. Anyone else for this question? Nope. Unless Geoffroy. No.
Yeah, I was gonna ask Singhild if she has an answer, but it's I don't know if there is a very typical temperature range for a high temperature BTES, because that varies very much from case to case.
Yeah, I was sitting here thinking if I had a good answer for BTES, but it's a little bit different with boreholes. Since it's a rather slow system, it's not like, you're working with a fluid like in ATIS and PTES and TTES. You have to consider the heat capacity of the borehole of the rock. So usually when you decide the storage capacity, you're looking at the heat capacity of the rock and then the temperature change in the rock. So the delta T, between the highest temperature and the lowest temperature over the season, that will give you the storage, the energy amount for the rock volume that you're using. But having said that, the tricky thing with the borehole thermal energy storage compared to systems where you basically pump a fluid is that the rock has a memory in a way that the other storage types don't have. So you can't only calculate on the energy. You have to consider both the energy amount and the flow capacity, the heat flow capacity, which may often be a limiting factor. So And my experience is that when you look at high temperature storages for like district heating applications, what often is a deal breaker is the capacity from the boreholes to meet the capacity demand. And also that you drop in temperature. I mean, you can charge the rock volume to a rather high temperature, but you can't extract the same temperature. The temperature will drop significantly, and it's often difficult to meet the capacity demand.
Very interesting. Thank you. It's a totally different approach, but it's good to see, well, how different it is. So thank you very much for that. Niels?
Yes, for the borehole storage, I agree on that it's not easy to calculate the capacity in a simple way. I think that you should actually perform a simulation to determine the capacity for the borehole storage.
Yes, that's necessary. You need to do simulations for it. Yes.
Thank you very much. Now moving on to the other question: are there widely accepted KPIs definitions for tests regarding storage capacity, efficiency, and cost? Yes, Jeffrey.
The answer is yes. And more specifically, in IEA Energy Storage Task 39, there has been already quite decent work that was done to define some KPIs for system for it, both in terms of key performance indicators, but also something that is called key design parameters, which is more the design aspects of a large thermal energy storage. And in this publication, there was also defined what kind of scope should be understood when you're talking about large thermal energy storage. Is it the storage itself? Or is it the storage with the auxiliary equipments? Or is it the storage, the auxiliary equipments, and also the district heating network? So all of this will have quite a big impact on what kind of key performance indicators you would look at. But if you focus specifically on the storage part, then I can also mention that some publications were made in the project I mentioned earlier, Treasure, and that there has been some reports specifically on key performance indicators that were further studied from Task 39. So it's inspired from the results of Task 39, but they go a bit more into practice on how to use them. And again, I will share the link in the chat. But I think these two are very, very good references, and they define how you would look at storage efficiency and other KPIs, levelized cost of heat, and so on.
Thanks for that, Singhild.
Yeah, there is also an IEA project within a heat pump program, HPT Annex 52, long-term performance monitoring of large ground source heat pump systems for residential and institutional and commercial buildings. That also did some reports on KPIs. I'll put it in the chat. Overall, I'd say that project has about 1,000 pages of reports, a very large number of reports, of which about 30 individual case study reports of long-term performance from various ground source heat pumps and underground thermal energy storage systems. So that's a huge resource that you could use. I'll link to it in the chat.
Perfect. Thanks so much. All right. If no one else, can move on to the other question. What's the most common LTES size or capacity globally in Europe? Yes, Shufran.
If we look at the volume and the numbers, the most common LTES size is the one defined by tank thermal energy storages. The most common type of large thermal energy storage is tanks. They have been built very widely in the EU, in probably in all countries of the EU. There are some tank thermal energy storages now, and the typical size would be in the range of 1,000 to 10,000 cubic meters, connected to let's say parts of a district heating network. Although today we can see that there are tank thermal energy storages that are getting much bigger. So if you look at in Denmark or in Germany, there are several projects that have had one or several 50,000 cubic meter tank thermal energy storages implemented. So that's another typical of what we see today. But generally speaking, I would say it's tank thermal energy storages of 1,000 to 10,000 cubic meters. And for now, it's mostly been done in very widespread in Denmark and in Germany, probably also a bit in Austria. But it's slowly but surely developing elsewhere. And the new trend, I would say, is pit thermal energy storage that is starting to be implemented at large scale in several countries. So Denmark, Germany, but also Poland. These are reported in the EU Project Treasure. So that would be in terms of global development. And there, the typical size, it's hard to say for the moment. It seems to start, well, it starts making sense at about 40,000 cubic meters, and it can go up to 500,000 cubic meters. But so far, there have been everything between 40,000 or even 20,000 and 200,000 cubic meters.
All right, thanks. Bas?
Sorry. Yes, can I share my screen? Because
Of course, go ahead.
There was some time ago, there was a heat store investigation. This heat store investigation has done nice research to the various storage technologies. So here. So here you see the tank, pits, borehole, aquifers, and then they have made a figure of the investment cost per cubic meter water, including the delta T, and here the storage volume. So then you have a little bit an idea, okay, where are the borehole systems? They are more in this volume range. As Geoffrey mentioned, the pit storage are becoming bigger and bigger, or these are more on the right side. And the tank storage are more on the smaller side, more the smaller scale, which is of course logic. And what you see with the aquifers is that they are more moving upwards, because there is in fact no limitation. If you have an aquifer, then you can make very large scale heat storage. So this may be interesting to add this figure somewhere in our answers, because it answers in one way something about the investment cost, also related to the storage volume, and that's also an answer to the size.
Perfect.
I hope this helps.
Yeah,
it
it does help, and it's a good illustration of the let's say storage size. Do you know if this has been published? Because I know that the heat store website is down for now.
Oh,
Um, So if this is available elsewhere, then that would be nice to be able to share a link.
Okay, then I need to check it because I just copied this figure for my presentations.
But yeah, so
I can check it with one of the authors. That's no problem. Yeah.
Good. Thank you.
I'll make a note of that.
Thank you very much. Singeld?
Yeah, when it comes to borehole thermal energy storage, the last 10 years have shown a tendency to make the borehole thermal energy storages larger and larger. I've made a sport in collecting data about the largest systems in the world, borehole thermal energy systems in the world, and the largest in the world currently is in China. It's the Beijing new Daxing Airport in Beijing that was completed just before the pandemic in the end of 2019, and the beta system there is a distributed beta system with several sort of larger areas, and the total number of boreholes is 11,000 boreholes. So that's, to my knowledge, the largest borehole thermal energy storage in the world. The second largest, to my knowledge, is Epic Systems Corporation campus in Verona. They have 6,700 something boreholes, 772 or something boreholes, also distributed over a large area among their buildings. And there are other examples of that. The largest in Europe that I know of, I may be wrong. There may be systems that I don't know of, but the one I know of is actually for cooling. It's in Romania. It's about 1,000 boreholes for a laser lab, cooling a laser lab. And it's been operational, I think, since 2013 or something like that. So, but if you talk about, I mean, those are extremes, but I would say that the most common borehole thermal energy storage size would be around 50 boreholes, maybe between 50 and 100 boreholes I would say would be, but the tendency is to make them larger and larger.
Right. Thanks a lot for these inputs. Very interesting. Yes. So we will take some other questions from the audience. If any of you have some, and we'll still be, the plan is still to take the questions regarding the EU regulation and the legal aspects when Joanna will join. But in the meantime, if any of you have some questions, please go ahead. We can take it, or some of them. And if it's not the case, or you don't have your question formulated in mind, we can just move on to some further question about costs in the meantime. So 2 questions that we kind of put on the side because it has already been somewhat answered during the last Q&A session. So the first one is like, what is the operational expenditure OPEX for LTES, including maintenance, repairs, and component replacement for 30-year period, specifically for a 200,000 cubic meter PTES, if possible, or just another size if you don't have the data. And the other question, which is how much is the typical cost for of a LTES in euros per cubic meter? Yes, Geoffrey.
So I think that Alex actually showed a good example of the OPEX for the PTES in Høje-Taastrup, so that can be used as a basis for that. In general, I would say a range, and I can give it in euro per megawatt hour charged into the storage. It would be in the range of 3 to 8 euro per megawatt hour charged into the storage, and that's because it's related to the cost of electricity. But also, the more you operate a bit thermal energy storage, the more spare parts are expected to wear. So that will also require a bit of maintenance. But I think the example that Per Alex gave is a pretty interesting one, and pretty recent one as well. And for the typical cost of large thermal energy storage in euros per cubic meter, actually this has been very well illustrated by the figure that Bas has shown. So I think this is the best answer we can give there. But I can see someone else has their hand up for this question, so I'll leave the floor.
Yes, thanks, Martin.
Yeah, hi. Regarding this question, I also agree with Jeffrey and Per Alex that when we have these values from Højtostrup, then it actually is possible to calculate the OPEX for a year, because at Aalborg SP we usually say that for a PTES we have a OPEX of 0.5 to 1% of the CAPEX per year, which would then be interesting to see if that actually holds up with what Per Alex showed, since it's also our technology. And for a PTES lit from Aalborg SP, we have a certification saying that we have a lifetime of at least 25 years. So maybe for a 30-year period, we might not need to actually change in materials. We don't know that for certain, since no operational site has been running for that long. So you might not even have to change any component or replace anything in that period. So it's a tough one to answer precisely, but yeah, that's basically it.
All right. All right. Thanks a lot. Yes, so if anyone has any question, please go ahead. Otherwise, yeah, we can just, yep, Alex.
Yeah, for the CAPEX, we have some curves in the technology catalog from the Danish Energy Agency. So actually, maybe Niels should have told this because he made them. But here you can find the water volume and the budget price. And we have put in prices for different storages and ages curve. And it can also be found in a new report we made for the Danish Energy Agency, and I will share a link to that report.
Thank you, Per Alex. What is interesting about this report compared to the curve we've seen that was also relayed by HeatStore is that these numbers are updated based on better knowledge about the technologies. So updated design for the lid, for example, and things like this. Also corrected for inflation. So that's an important factor to keep in mind when you try to use those curves. You have to correct for inflation between that period and the current status. And you should also, as I mentioned before, you should also keep in mind that these are kind of best case scenario costs. And if you have a specific cost, then the specific case, then the cost might change, because it will require more time and effort to build the storage. Niels, you want to complement?
Yes, that a single item which is important in the price curve is that we have used very low prices for the land. So if you are on a location with high prices for the land, that actually influences the costs here a lot, or can do.
But still, we are, compared to tank storages, we are a factor 2 to 3 below in capex.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, indeed. So I have seen in the chat from the early messages in the chat, there was Anas that was asking if it was too late to ask a question. So if you want, you can. And Anas, I was also asking if you could share in the chat the study that
yeah,
you
the
were
study
mentioning.
from HSLU. Yeah, sure.
Yes,
I can.
please.
I can, and yeah, the question has been partially answered, but I can still ask the question. Maybe someone wants to add something. So I'm working on a project where one of the parts is to being able to forecast how much a LTES project would cost, and there are a lot of curves and costs in diverse documents in the literature, let's say. But from experience, we've seen that a lot of these prices are very volatile, to say the least, and they're very case and system dependent. So my question is there a point in trying to find a curve that summarizes everything and to try to like have some kind of a function where you just plug in the volume and you get like the capex? My own opinion would be no, but I would like to hear what the other experts have to say. Thank you.
If I may answer this one, I think it's a very interesting question. I have made a lot of feasibility studies for large thermal energy storages coupled to district heating for plain energy, and I would say that it does make sense in the specific case where you try to do a screening. So if you're trying to optimize your system size, and you have different technologies and you're looking for what is the best solution for that specific case, then one way to screen it is to have, let's say, a generic cost curve, and that will help you to identify what would be best suited for your specific case. So in that sense, I would say it makes sense. It can help you to have this kind of general cost curve. And at the same time, I will completely agree with you saying that there are no absolute truths. Every investment cost will be very site specific. They will be country specific, as you mentioned. It's not the same prices for a LTES if you're in Germany, if you're in Switzerland, if you're in France, or if you're in Denmark. It's true. And one way to go around this is, once you have identified what kind of general technology would be interesting for you, because you know you need a certain size, and you know that you have certain conditions, geological conditions that give you access to this or that technology, is to then try to get quotation from manufacturers
Absolutely.
to have an idea. And
Yeah,
that's
exactly what I was
the way
trying to
around.
do.
But these general curves, they still can help you to do a pre-screening, I would say, and it's still useful in that sense. So for optimization purposes.
Okay, so I think we're on the same page. It's very reassuring. Thank you.
Definitely, yeah. And I can see that Johanna has finally joined us. Thank you for making it just on time. We have a couple of questions for you, and we kept that so perfectly timed, and that will be helping us to close the session. So. The first question that we had for you specifically is about this new EU Renewable Energy Directive, RED III. And the question was, how much is it expected to reduce the time needed for getting permits for LTES? So if you can answer that, that would be great.
Yes. Do you hear me?
Yes,
Yes,
we can hear you.
Yes. Okay. Well, it's not. Yeah. In theory, it's easy to answer this question. It has to significantly shorten or reduce the time, but the more I deal with these kind of questions, the more insecure I get, and my hope is not growing that it really makes such a great reducement, because it of course it depends on how it is the RED III Act is actually transformed into the certain national law. And well, in theory, if you are in a designated so-called renewable acceleration area, the permitting process is capped at 12 months. And if you are outside these areas, the limit is 2 years. Well, if this is a real reduction, I don't know. Depends on how long it lasted before in various cases. But what you have to know in case of storage assets is that they are not the main assets that are being
included or targeted.
Included, yeah, targeted. Yes, that was the word I was looking for. It's only for so-called co-located storage, and this is only if they are combined with a facility producing renewable energy and connected to the same grid access point. And for example, in Germany, these you have to also have a kind of a serving role, which is so. For example, for Peters, the serving role is not given if it's more than 1 hectare, or yeah. So it's kind of question also for which kind of energy producing facility the so-called acceleration areas are transformed into national law. And in Germany, unfortunately, originally they wanted to make acceleration areas for solar and wind assets, but now it's only wind. And in my opinion, the practical use of this is maybe not so large, because for wind turbines, the storage assets that are practically more relevant are battery storages and not so much thermal storage assets. So yeah, it has to be well evaluated as whether planning authorities will actually utilize the preferential treatment provision in practice to benefit, for example, Peters. It's, in my opinion, a bit doubtful. And for example, when we talk about other thermal energy storage, it's like LTES, they are not included because they need to have a hole or hole. They have to get into the underground, and there is an exception for those kind of energy storage. So it's really kind of not so. I'm not so optimistic that it will really be so good for in
Okay.
Germany at least. Yeah.
Yeah, no, but that's interesting to know. The directive seemed very interesting, but in practice, the way it will be translated, it's not necessarily as broad
Yeah.
as we would hope it to be. Okay, but
Um,
that's, I mean,
yes.
in a way, it is still good to know the limitations of those. So thank you for that.
Yes, and what you also have to know is that it's not automatically thermal energy storages are not automatically included in acceleration areas, but first you have to have a plan where it is included specifically this kind of specific storage. And as I said, I think at least in Germany, where acceleration areas are only given for wind energy. I don't know if you have other practical experience, but my colleagues, when I asked them how often are thermal energy storages combined with wind energy producing assets, I don't think it's so common.
It's, I mean, not directly at least. And for it to be considered in the directive, it has to be a common project. So, yeah. But thank you for that update. I mean, it's very important to know what's going on in this field. So thanks for that. We have another question for you in just 5 minutes to answer it.
Yes, I'm so sorry.
It's okay. No worries. No worries.
Chaos month.
How can LTES be included in urban planning, and how easily can a city prioritize LTES construction and integration? And that's actually a question for you, but it can also be a question for Per Alex, for example, in terms of city planning. I know that city planning is a big thing in Denmark. So so please, the floor is yours.
Yeah, Alex? Yeah, but because in Germany, I have to give kind of the same answer, because in Germany, large thermal energy storages are usually not in the city itself or in the big city life area, but outside in the on the green grass areas, which are very highly protected in the German planning law, and there you have to have a prioritization in law of these assets to have a really have the possibility to get it permitted. And this is a question also which is not clearly answered by either by law, nor by jurisdiction.
Yeah, regulation. Yeah.
Yeah, jurisdiction. We also, if the highest Gericht, judge would say this is included in, I don't know, certain norm, it would be clear, but there are very high insecurities in planning and how to read the law. If thermal energy storages are not so prioritized in Germany yet.
But that's good to know. We still need to do a lot of lobbying work if we want to move forward. So probably Task 45 has a role to play there.
And RED 4, I give all my hope do this.
Okay,
All
good.
good things are for.
Good, perfect. Thank you, Johanna. Alex, you wanted to add something maybe to close this this question?
Yeah, there's an obligation for heat planning, and I think this should be part of the heat planning for municipalities. And especially when you make the mapping, then you can see if you have, for instance, excess heat in the summer periods, then it can be interesting with the long-term storage. So I think it should be possible, maybe you can define them in task 45, to find indicators in the heat planning process where there might be possibilities for long-term storage, so that the utility has to investigate that afterwards. When we make more precise heat planning in Denmark, we actually make an Energy Pro calculation, and then we can see if there's a feasibility, economical feasibility in a storage. So, and finding areas, I know you always have very expensive areas in Germany, but if you need a storage, you can actually still pay 200 euros per square meter land, and it will be cheaper than a tank storage. So I think long-term storage is whatever, if it's betas or it's ATES or it's betas, are interesting, and you have to look for the conditions when you make the heat planning.
Thank you, Alex, for these precisions. And yeah, you were referring to this new law on heat planning that is mandatory now in every German municipality with more than 45,000 inhabitants, I think.
It's actually it's all European. It's an
okay,
EU
yeah.
law.
Yes, it's an EU law.
It's European law also, but in Germany there's I just came from a meeting where this is these questions are very highly
very high on the
discussed
agenda,
because it will all change in the next year.
Yeah,
we can expect very large changes in law and also in the heat planning area. And
so
I hope
things are moving forward. Yeah, you hope?
I hope that heat and thermal energy storage are better
prioritized there.
Prioritized, but we do our best from here. I'm in Berlin right now.
Good. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
So thanks to all of our experts, and thanks for the audience also to ask questions. I would just say to close this session that there is a webinar coming up. It will take place on the 16th of December, and the main topic will be the technical aspects of large thermal energy storages. All technologies will be covered, and also some economic aspects. So pretty much in the same topics that were covered by this Q&A session. We will also see, let's say, a presentation from about optimized integration of aquifer thermal energy storage in the district heating systems. So looking forward to see you there, and see you very soon. This recording will be put on the IEA Energy Storage YouTube channel, so you can enjoy it there. Thank you very much, and have a nice evening, everyone.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye. Bye.